Hello world, I am Nolan Clay Rogers, and we are back with another anonymous astrology video for another client. And this one is a little bit different because one, as I call myself a wizard, both tongue-in-cheek and slightly serious, I would argue that a wizard's job is to answer two questions. One is, how do we know something? And the second question is, what does it mean? Now, if we want to get fancy, those two fields would be called epistemology and either semantics or semiotics, depending upon the type of meaning we're after. But effectively, that is what I boiled down my weird little job title to, is how do we know something and what does it mean? Mostly because this client's questions are a little bit more in-depth and abstract than most will have when it comes to tarot, astrology, esoteric, spiritual questions, and the like. Because when my client booked this session for her, she was asking for clarity around what the work is that she's here to do. Preferably best case scenario, and of course figure out how that work that she's supposed to do will provide resources without the need of selling herself short or selling out, more importantly, because there needs to be a balance between the effort and the compensation that we're all trying to find. That's the desire, right? That is the first thing that this prodigal daughter is trying to go off and find, is what is our purpose? Now, within astrology, we have a lot of different techniques for determining what that purpose is, or what we are, quote unquote, supposed to do. But it's very easy because it's based on math. Now, I steal a little technique from Vedic astrology called the Atmakarka. Now, the Atmakarka can basically just be translated to the West as purpose. Now, this purpose comes from her Saturn in Capricorn placement in the 4th house at about 25 and change degrees. There's a couple other runners up that are trying to vie for position as far as the purpose, but the math is very clear. 25 degrees and 18 arc minutes equals Saturn in Capricorn in the 4th house is the purpose of this chart. Now, the chart, often called the map of the soul, particularly popularized by Carl Jung, the map is not the territory. So we have to give some context to understand what this little map pointing to Saturn in Capricorn in the 4th house means, which comes to my second question that I ask all of my clients is, what do you value? Now, when my client put in her answer for this, she's talking about work that's restorative. Now, a lot of these words will be very pie in the sky, and we will break it down here in a second. But we want restorative work that helps good people do the things that light them up. Now, this also includes eliminating tensions, practical stumbling blocks, and we don't want her labor going to the wrong things. So, for example, she listed sustainable communities, equitable power, and resource structures. Couple points of order. Unfortunately, the main problem all my clients have is that if one unit of what we desire does not directly translate to one step closer towards, or one more unit of, what we say we value, there's going to be a misalignment. Unfortunately, most people's purposes, let alone mine or my clients', does not lead to other people getting good things for themselves. This is just a fact. And so we then have to come back to this problem of words like good, or restorative, or equitable. This is all presuming morality. It's presuming right or wrong, and that this client is a better or worse person based upon how much her purpose is able to give her those good people getting good things for the rest of their days. We have to redefine this, mostly because natural law makes it very clear, and natural law is a testable moral and ethical system that, crack open any holy book, we understand that the only harm is theft of time. The only way. So examples, again, murder is stealing people's time on this planet. Larceny steals the time someone spent to acquire whatever was stolen. And lying, whether by omission or commission, steals the time a person would rather spend with someone whose desires and values are more aligned with theirs. Anything else you can possibly imagine is definitionally right and good and moral if it does not steal another person's time, including your own. This is then where the big problem comes from, is words like equitable, restorative, good are generally not referred to as not stealing time. Why is this important in this context? We have to understand that stealing people's time includes bubble wrapping them from the consequences of their own actions. Saturn, interestingly enough, I represent Saturn in the tarot as the Hanged Man, whereas normally it's represented as the universe. We can blame a couple old codgers for that. I like this system a little bit better for a couple reasons. The Hanged Man, classically, is the form of a French punishment for traitors. So if you were strung up like this as a traitor and the blood didn't burst all the blood vessels in your brain, you were struck down and you were branded a traitor for the rest of your days to ideally not act out betrayal again. Saturn is not only the planet astrologically that rules time, Saturn also rules boundaries. It rules consequences. It rules suffering. And this is a big problem whenever we get into, cross-cultural studies or anything else, is most spiritual systems prioritize suffering as the end-all be-all metric of whether or not something is good or bad. But if we just look at things from a Western utilitarian perspective, if we are only trying to lessen suffering and increase whatever good feelings are the opposite of suffering, we end up hurting people. There is no objective moral standard whenever we are only measuring our worth or how good things are by how much suffering we prevent other people from feeling, particularly because that suffering is again related to the consequences of Saturn, of the Hanged Man. And these consequences, what happens whenever my 4-year-old decides to run off without her shoes on? And she's already been told she needs to put her shoes on, otherwise the rocks will hurt her feet. If I try and just scoop her up before she experiences the consequences of her own actions, of one, not listening to someone who's trying to do the best for her and protect her. She's already had it explained to her what will happen if she does not comply with the basic rule. If I stop her from hurting her feet on those rocks, she will suffer more later. Because that will just teach her that, Dad is going to scoop me up and save me from whatever was going to happen. But that doesn't allow her to understand these concepts of boundaries, of consequences, and the suffering that comes whenever we do not respect those things. This is a basic lesson that most of us don't have reinforced if we're even taught it to begin with. And so for this client's chart, we have to understand that the nasty, unfortunate things of Saturn are also the things that get us all the good things in life. Saturnian consequences and boundaries are also the things that give us agriculture. They're also the things that give us running water. They give us good city-states. They give us an actual municipal system that is good and equitable and restorative. And more importantly, like Saturn likes to do, it likes to trudge and be sustainable and exist in perpetuity, going around and around and around. This is why the ring in particular is such an important symbol of Saturn. Not just because it literally has rings around it, physically and astronomically, but also because the ring is the furthest out thing that Saturn rules for us. The reason why Saturn was one of the last planets that the ancient Greeks were able to talk about and be able to conceive of is Saturn's the last planet we can see with the naked eye. It is the final ring of human perception, unaided by any technology or tools or anything else. This is the furthest our consciousness can stretch without assistance from any other technology and tool. And it's also why it is the outer boundary, and oftentimes if you play video games or read books, Saturn will represent that outer enemy, that final boss, before we actually get to the end game scenario, or the extra game scenarios of all the fun mini games and other things, and now we're just playing for high scores. This is the final test of our skill as people that live life in this physical manifestation here and now, regardless of what you think puts you here on this planet. So this is why Saturn is going to be so important for determining that purpose and that work. Because again, we have a couple interesting things as far as what we can do with these systems. So the Hanged Man can be represented in the tarot by a lot of different things. Now notice how some of these decks are anywhere from 1495 to some of them through to the 19th century, and some of them are modern. But understand that this Hanged Man symbol of Saturn, this is the person that we ideally want to be in a sustainable community. We want to be the old, wise person that people actually listen to. We have clear boundaries. We have clear communal standards. We want to get to Saturn, even though Saturn generally represents the quote-unquote enemy we often rebel against. Now, the main problem for this client is going to be a couple things in her chart, mostly because there are some other really good placements that are pulling her attention away from the main Saturnian purpose. The main one is going to be Venus in Pisces. Venus represented by the Empress card, and Pisces represented as Judgment over here, as the final sign in the zodiac. Now, Venus loves to be in Pisces. Our goddess of love loves to be all up in Pisces' oceanic business. Now, mind you, Venus herself is said to have been born out of the ocean. So even from the mythology, Venus is going to enjoy this mass expanse of the ocean of Pisces. However, this is a distraction for this client because this Venus that's having a great old time is in the 6th house. And again, the 6th house represents day-to-day work, schedules, drudgery, and illness. So unfortunately, this Venus is going to trick this client more often than not to say, oh, my schedule, my own suffering, the things that I have to slog through every single day, those are fun, those are enjoyable. I still get an endorphin hit off of that. But endorphins and all those other happy chemicals in our brain are not my wheelhouse. It's not my job. That's the job of your therapist. That's the job of your doctor. I don't care about what's going on in your head, mostly because we can't control anything that's going on in our heads. I can say something inflammatory, sing a little ditty from your childhood packed with nostalgia, and I can make you feel anything I want you to feel based upon my understanding of how humans work. So if you cannot be in control of your thoughts and feelings and emotions that are all in your head, swimming around inside some electrical signals of fat and salt, I'm not going to put any moral weight on how we feel about doing a certain thing. So this kind of fixes the Venus problem. Mind you, once we do start focusing on this purpose, this Venus is going to make the day-to-day a whole lot more fun. But we can't listen to Venus first, as far as the actual metric of success here. So that's the main problem over here, is this client is going to enjoy and love the day-to-day drudgery more than she technically should, depending upon the environment that she's in. Second culprits that are a problem. 2 other really objectively great placements of the moon in rulership in Cancer, and then Jupiter in exaltation in Cancer. Up here in the 10th house, which is normally the house of career. Now, from a truly astronomical standpoint, Jupiter is bigger than Saturn. Its gravity is more. But unfortunately, these 2 planets are always fighting, right? Mythologically, Zeus, one of the Greek gods associated with Jupiter, literally kills his father, Saturn, or Kronos, or time. So naturally, in this story of astrology, this chart is going to want Jupiter to win. But that's not what has to happen right now, because from the 10th house perspective of career, of the throne, of the height or zenith of our personhood, that is in the sky. Saturn is down here in the 4th house of the earth, the ground, the home, the physical space you inhabit. And escape velocity is a hell of a drug. We have to understand that even though Jupiter and the moon are having a really good time up here in the 10th house, this is creating what's called an opposition in astrology. It's where planets are aligned at 180 degrees across from each other, and they are not going to have this tug of war end but one way. Only one of these sections gets to win the tug of war. And there's ways that we can kind of finagle the energies of this or how we tell the story about this, but effectively, one of these 2 sides has to win. From a purpose perspective, we want Saturn to win. Saturn is also already grounded. It is already in a strong place. So technically, Saturn is primed to win. But if we get distracted by all of the spirit of the law shoulds of Jupiter and all of the nurturing desires of the moon in Cancer trying to protect all these little tiny babies that are biological adults and live their own lives and have to accept their own consequences of their own suffering, I don't like what's going to happen for this client if we let all of these good feelings up in the 10th house override the Saturnian basic boundaries around the home. Now, I say home, but this is also about inheritance. Now, I love the knights in the tarot because it can help us represent some of the 5 major aspects. And the Knight of Pentacles, or the Knight of Discs, I use to represent opposition, this opposition between these 2 halves of the chart that are pulling against one another. This knight is stationary as compared to the other ones that are normally in motion. Only one person, only one planet gets to have this coin. Only one person. This is a lesson of a zero-sum game, unfortunately. This is the thing that this client will be fighting whenever we're talking about sustainability and equitability and building resource structures that are also fair. Unfortunately, the fairness is finite because we are still living in a mortal world. Now, mind you, there's lots of fun math as far as technically from a math perspective, every person on this planet could have the same standard of living because there are plenty of resources. Our modern technology and infrastructure advances and everything else could provide everybody the same amount of this coin. Problem is that is not my client's job to provide that coin to everyone. Unfortunately, logistics, infrastructure, math, moving things from place to place, that's a retrograde Mercury over there in the 8th house of Taurus for her. I'm not going to recommend that she's the one in charge of putting this coin and making sure it gets to everyone, everywhere, all the time. That's not her job. Doing the math and trying to figure out all of the movement of physical resources to the people that she may care about, and they are probably worthy of care and love and all of that good stuff, she can't be the one to do any of that because her focus, this coin, has to go towards 4th house endeavors. And the 4th house endeavors are, of course, the home. That's one of the easiest ways that you can interpret it. Problem with a home is that it has 4 walls and a roof and a foundation and a property line. And if we don't understand the metaphysical importance and reason why those things exist, we may let things in that we've let in before, historically, that are still committing the same Saturnian sins against our own purpose. Sin's an interesting term, mostly because Capricorn is represented by this card of the devil. And the devil, of course, it has those little goat horns of Capricorn, but also the devil, whenever we look at this card, the figures on the card are chained. Yes, they are technically bound to something, but those chains are loose. These 2 figures are able to escape whatever ensnared them to the devil at any point in time. The slavery that they are experiencing is an illusion. The things that we think are keeping us down, the man that we think has the boot heel on the back of our neck, that is an illusion. Because through whatever metaphysical system you want to utilize to justify our actions, we are born free. The only reason we experience this bondage or servitude or anything else is we are told a lie that we then accept and believe. Now, this goes back to natural law because lying is a theft of time, and the people that lie to us will receive consequences one way or another. But there's a second part to natural law that's not just about not stealing time. It is the moral obligation of self-defense. This is the problem that most of my clients have because self-defense, of course, recognizes when you have been stolen from, when your time has been taken. Then we have to use the magic word every baby learns, which is no. To master this Saturn in Capricorn in the 4th house placement, we have to be very clear on the no around what enters the boundaries of our home, of our family, of our community. Because everything else that we are currently trying to serve, everything else we are trying to buffer from the consequences of their own actions, are people and things and ideologies that we have to say no towards. Because being bound to those things that are not directly relevant to us is an illusion. But how do we determine that relevance? And I know that's difficult whenever we live in a hyper-connected, technologically advanced world where we can send messages across the planet, let alone outside of the planet. We have to go back to a little thing I like to call Dungeons and Dragons. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, history-wise, starts in the 70s. One of the most popular and most sold modules for Dungeons and Dragons is called The Keep at the Borderlands. Now, The Keep at the Borderlands has this lack of a storyline. It's more of a sandbox adventure to where you and your adventuring party, you show up to this keep on the Borderlands. It's got a mayor, it's got a blacksmith, it's got one of every kind of person that has to keep a tiny little isolated village running. And about a half day's ride outside of that keep is the Caves of Chaos. Now, the Caves of Chaos are the metaphorical representation of any other problem we might be having in our physical world. This client and the rest of us, if it is outside a 45-minute drive, it's probably not our job. It is not within the bounds of our community and our home and our family, and more importantly, our sphere of agency. Now, some people might be blessed by whatever put us here to just be able to post something online and things quote-unquote happen somewhere else in the world. That's not how most of us get to live, though. And so we have to be realistic about the boundaries and the structures that we're embedded in. So practically, for anything that this client wants to do and wants to fix or wants to make right or wants to provide her labor for, it has to be within some form of municipal boundaries. I personally like to think of things as far as if we want an extended boundary, it extends to your watershed, to the nearest mountain range and the nearest body of water / river that feeds it. So if we want to go a little bit bigger, fine. That's the farthest our Jupiterian expansion gets to go. It's the nearest mountain range, nearest body of water to create that watershed that we physically live in and drink the water from. Those are our boundaries. So anything within those boundaries, if we want to make it more fair, more just, more equitable, more sustainable, excellent. You get to do that. Whatever you end up doing, that direction will probably go well. But it will not go well if we don't start with the basic self-defense of saying no to everything that is outside those boundaries. And that includes mentally, that includes spiritually, that includes anything that is physically not causing us a problem. Because the biggest drain on most of our energies and our time are worrying about things that are happening halfway across the world or states away. We physically can't do anything about it. And worrying about it or causing problems or internally wasting our energy and our time and our own peace on something that will not physically affect us outside of third and fourth order effects is not helpful. So the first step in getting this purpose done and making sure that this disc actually comes to this purpose of the grounded home, community, and sustainable continuance of whatever it is that is most important to her has to start by saying no. That's the first step in self-defense. Now, mind you, we have this thing called the use of force paradigm, or the use of force pyramid. So when we get confused about what to do with self-defense, we can go to that use of force paradigm. It starts with the word no. I don't want that. That's crossing my boundaries. That's doing a thing I don't want right now or is harming me. That's step one. Normally, about 60% of the time with normal people, they didn't know that that was a problem, and they'll fix it. If we just tell them the truth that, nope, that's harming me, that's causing a problem, the vast majority of humans in this world, which are generally good people, will solve the problem for you. There will be no further issue. We just have to communicate it. Step two, after we've enunciated the problem and actually explained what's going on, is to move with our feet. We create distance. We actually utilize boundaries for our defense. Because if somebody's not listening, we have to take a step back. This is also why, now mind you, understand that my work is pre-political. These are the metaphysical and spiritual underpinnings of your political and social day-to-day life. But we have to use those grounded political and social metaphors. So for example, the cop that's the bad guy is the cop that gets scared and then shoots first. How cops are supposed to be trained, like I learned getting my criminal justice degree, is they have to use this use of force paradigm. They say no, stop, put your hands up, hey, don't do that thing. And then what are they trained to do? They are trained to take steps backwards, to remove themselves from the threat first, to de-escalate, to continue saying no, to continue explaining what the consequences are if a person continues doing the harmful, dangerous thing they're doing. We move with our feet first. That's what makes us a good guy in the scenario. If we say no, somebody continues to aggress against us and we immediately start aggressing against them, we now also become a bad guy. That is not helpful because it's wasting our time to get into a fight that we could avoid. If we move with our feet and suddenly the aggressor de-escalates, this means that now we are safe behind some boundaries. If that aggressor continues to come after us through those boundaries, then we have to start escalating the use of force to protect ourselves. This is also why, take for example, a street fight or a bar fight, extremely dangerous and deadly. Mostly because I don't care why you got into the bar fight, you are trying to steal each other's bodily autonomy and agency to be well and be okay, to have plenty of time here on this planet. So even if you're trying to throw punches and duke it out all in good fun, one wrong punch can clock someone in the jaw, they hit the ground, and suddenly they are in a coma or worse. When someone continues to aggress against you, it is an understanding that they do not value your life. They do not care whether or not you live or die. If you have said no, you have moved with your feet, and now they are still aggressing against you. It means that in that scenario, you have to say no to that person by whatever means necessary to be safe and whole in your person. You have no moral obligation to protect the aggressor at that point. Now, those aggressors, from a metaphysical standpoint, can look like a lot of things. Where are our tax dollars going to? Where is my personal time in my calendar going to? Where are funds? Where are food? Where are other things going towards that we need to have better boundaries around to say no about? This is not fun, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Definitely not fun. What is fun is about this person's chart. We have a sun in Taurus, we have a moon in Cancer, and this client's ascendant sign is Libra, represented by the Justice card. Now, the ascendant sign is the first house. In astrology, we understand that planets are basically who's doing something. Signs are what is occurring, and the houses are where it's occurring. So a first house Libra understands that this Justice card is occurring in her physical person, her body, her psycho-spiritual makeup, is concerned with this equity, with this justice, with things going right. Interestingly enough, Saturn loves to be in Libra. It may rule Capricorn and Aquarius, but if Saturn is in Libra, Saturn is hunky-dory. This is the perfect sign for marriage because Saturn rules rings and Libra rules weddings and textiles and all those beautiful, wonderful things of Venus. So understand that how we can know in her person that things are going better and we're saying no properly is you will feel more and more Venusian. You will experience more beauty. You will experience more joy. You will experience more sociability and actual one-to-one conversations and behaviors because doing your Saturnian purpose of saying no allows this Venusian desire to flourish. It's the only way it can flourish. The mirror of Venus is protected by the ring of Saturn, the boundary that protects that fragile glass that can reflect light back. This is how we're going to know that things are going better and going, quote unquote, right for this person who is trying to do their purpose and trying to do things good. Good is only determined by not stealing another person's time and not letting your time be stolen. All of the other good is definitionally a right because we know what wrong is. Anything else you can possibly imagine. Tequila at 10:30 on a Tuesday. Driving a Maserati 300 miles per hour down the Autobahn in Germany. Any possible thing that does not steal another person's time is definitionally right and good and moral. You just have to take the steps to get there. And this client will get there so much easier if we focus on the Saturnian hard thing of definitional boundaries, of proper allocation of resources and time within a reasonable sphere of influence and agency. Anything else you can possibly imagine is on the table for the goods that could occur, or the good people that may exist, but they may not make you feel the way you want to feel. Just don't steal each other's time. This is going to be the most important point for you, because when we do it, we need to understand that there are some rewards. And so this Saturn at 25 degrees Capricorn in the fourth house is also represented by the Four of Discs. This is our reward. This is what sustainability looks like for this client, but also for most people, because again, Capricorn, for all of us, will rule that stable position, that grounded foundation. It's protection, it's saving, it's power, it's kingship and throne, it's abundance, and everything else in between. That Four of Discs will be the reward that we can ask for. Now, mind you, the 4 isn't the biggest number in the deck. I'll admit that. We get 1 through 10 as far as discs are concerned, and it's on the lower half. But 4 is sustainable. 4 is also ruled by Jupiter, this thing that expands. And so if you have a foundation in the fourth house, represented by this position of Saturn, the devil, and the Four of Discs, we understand that not only are we giving the devil his due of the hard, terrible consequences that he is supposed to punish people for not following, we also then get our due in return. And this disc gets delivered to a former traitor to now live the life that he wants to live, correctly aligned with law and justice and right and good and beauty. That's how we do it. So thank you all for paying attention. I so appreciate my client for being able to be here on this planet and ask these questions of me so that way I can also provide these for everybody else around. If you need anything else, please reach out to me at nolanclayrogers.com to where I have custom content that can be created for you like this. If you need something a little bit more, I have pattern classroom series that happen every week, and it's a 40-week rotating class that you can do, which you will receive a wonderful little Nashville Cosmic Rhythm workbook to kind of learn how to DIY all of this for yourselves. You'll be able to ask 40 questions through the year to figure out anything that you want to. That's about 40 hours worth of content at minimum, and I tend to be long-winded, so I can't help myself. You'll get more for that. Or if you really need to sit down physically with a one-on-one session, we will have 2-hour deep dives for as many sessions as you need for yourself. And I have some special deals going on for those that want to purchase an entire year in advance and get a whole lot of help very quickly, as long as we're not in an emergency situation. Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate you, and have a wonderful rest of your day.